Now let's go back a little bit on Netanyahu and what he represents. So first of all, the government that he's formed, because Israel only has coalition governments. There's never ever been one party after the many parties that exist in which one party held a majority of the seats in the Knesset, which is like the US Congress. A majority means over 60 seats, and no party, no single party has gotten anywhere near that. So every time a government has to be formed, it has to be a coalition government, which is similar to many countries in Europe as well. However, in this particular government, Netanyahu, this particular formation of a government, Netanyahu was under extreme pressure to find enough parties to support his being prime minister. And he went all the way to the ultra-right, almost fascist party. And two of them are headed by a guy named Ben Gvir and another guy named Smotrich. And they're like vigilantes. They're like, really outside the idea of law. And they've taken out that vigilantism on the West Bank in particular. During the course of this war in Gaza, there's also been a real explosion of attacks by Israel, the IDF, and settlers on the West Bank against Palestinians. And many of these attacks and killings are just over the top. They're outrageous. They're not based on any real need, any self-defense. It's really a way to grab more land. So the settlers on the West Bank are primarily Orthodox Jews who believe that Israel should conquer all of the greater Israel, which means all the way essentially from the sea to the river. We've heard Palestinians chant from the river to the sea. So the alternative, or the other side of the coin, is from the sea, meaning the Mediterranean, to the river, meaning the Jordan River. Israeli extremists would like to do that. They also, when they're really extreme, want to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the central mosque in Jerusalem. It's where the temple, Solomon's temple, had been. So the remaining part of the temple is called the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall. We've got an ultra-right-wing government with some very, very extreme views. They include kind of messianic views, and it's really unclear how they can be stopped, even though there is a growing opposition. Let's talk about the opposition. Netanyahu had proposed a judicial reform law 2 years ago, which would have really had a devastating effect on the power of the Israeli Supreme Court. Now, the Israeli Supreme Court has been considered one of the top Supreme Courts, is highly respected in the world. As a result of this proposal, which would have taken a lot of power away from the court, huge demonstrations occurred every Saturday of 100,000 people or more. Now, we're talking about a country of less than 8 million. On a relative scale with the US, we're talking, I can't calculate at this moment. We're talking about millions and millions. And it was happening every Saturday all over the country. And it seemed like there might be a way that that would unseat Netanyahu, but it did not. However, it did defeat the judicial reform law. The other thing is, Netanyahu is under criminal indictment for bribery and other things. And he's been under indictment since 2019, but has not been tried yet. Apparently, he cannot be tried while he's prime minister. So there's a feeling that he's keeping the war going to protect himself, because when he steps down or when he's forced out, he will not be able to claim immunity from prosecution. The overall situation is terrible, really terrible, because if the country is losing international standing, that's for sure. And Netanyahu's really to blame for that. And it's pretty well known that once he steps down, he will be taken out of office. There's pretty much no question about that. Will Israel be thrown into turmoil, like even more turmoil than it's in now? To be seen. That is something to be seen. But certainly, we're not in a period in any sense of stability between Israel, Palestine, Israel and the West Bank, and in general, the whole region. There's the Iranian issue, there's the Hezbollah issue, where there's been some attacks from the north, where Hezbollah is located. And there's also, here's the most important one, the issue of the hostages. It seems very clear that the hostage families are correct in accusing the government and Netanyahu of taking a negligent approach to the freedom of these hostages who are still being held. What makes it extremely disturbing is that it's well known that if Israel could negotiate again for a ceasefire with Hamas, which was done, and it lasted for like 4 weeks, hostages were released, and more hostages could be released if there was another ceasefire. And Netanyahu and his government have refused to consider really a ceasefire unless there were conditions in which essentially Hamas would do unconditional surrender. Now, it is legitimate for Israel to want to wipe out Hamas. That's legitimate. And going into tunnels and so forth is necessary. However, the continuation of bombing hospitals and destroying the entire medical system and preventing food from getting in, preventing medical supplies from getting in, preventing oil and fuel from getting in, to the point where by blocking crossing points, that these trucks are ready to go in, crossing points are blocked, Israeli government makes it impossible, IDF makes it impossible, to the point where the US built this entire landing situation off the coast of Gaza in order to bring in supplies. However, that will not be enough. So we've got a situation in Gaza in which people are living under famine, potentially starving. Thousands of kids have been killed, and Hamas has not been destroyed fully. There has never been, in the whole course of these 8 months, a strategy. There's only been tactile approach. And tactics are basically short-term kind of thing. Strategy is like more of a greater picture, more of a big picture thing, and it's much longer. And U.S. has been urging Israel to have a strategy after the end of the war. We don't know when that is. And Netanyahu has not done that, has been unwilling to do that.